Okay guys, so as soon as I finished my Attack on Titan 2 review, I was all set on jumping right into Atelier, Liddy, and Sewell and playing that until I was ready to review it. But thanks to Team 4 Star's gaming channel having Pokemon Nuzlocke videos coming up on my YouTube feed, I wanted to play a Pokemon game. And since the Pokemon Switch RPG is still in development, my only real choice was to finally pop in that cartridge and start playing the Pokemon fighting game. And it was a random impulse decision that was well worth it. Here is my review of Pokken Tournament DX for the Nintendo Switch. The basic premise of Pokken Tournament is something you've heard before. You're a newbie trainer, and your goal is to be the very best, like no one ever was. But the twist is that you're in a very special region of the Pokemon world, the Farum region, where you have technology that allows you to not only communicate with your Pokemon partner, but sync up your movements, giving you the ability to help them in battle outside of just giving them orders. So, being a newbie of the region, you gather your gear, find an advisor to guide you along, and challenge the Pokemon League, working your way up to that number 1 spot. And like most Pokemon games, you unknowingly become involved in a plot that puts the entire fate of the region in your hands alone. Now, I don't love the story of Pokken Tournament, but I also don't hate it. It has a flow that's very similar to the other games of the series, and it has a pretty interesting plot twist in the element that puts the fate of the region in your hands. In short, I've seen better stories from the series, but I've definitely seen worse as well. Now, gameplay is a little bit hard to describe for Pokken Tournament. It's a 3D fighting game, but at the same time it's a 2D fighting game. So let's call it a hybrid fighting game with RPG elements. Now, before we dive into the game, this is an updated version, the definitive version of Pokken Tournament that originally released on the Wii U and arcades. So what's different between the Switch version and the previous versions? The most prominent difference is its roster. Pokken Tournament DX includes all of the base characters from the Wii U, all of the arcade exclusive characters, plus a new character that's only available in the Nintendo Switch version. That's not counting the 2 DLC characters that released later that are also technically exclusive to this version of the game. The Switch version also supports team battles in multiplayer, as well as daily challenges that are character-based missions to give you some extra skill points to put on your stats. So when you start up the game, you're given this big world map full of places you can go, but all of these places basically boil down to 3 different types of areas. You've got your customization in My Town, where you can customize your advisor, your own character, your player card, and your Pokemon partners. Then you've got your single player modes, where you can do daily challenges, story mode, battles against the CPU, or tutorials. And you've got your multiplayer modes, where you can do one-on-one battles in split screen, local multiplayer with multiple systems, or online multiplayer. Now, simplifying like that doesn't mean it's really simple. All of the different game modes have a lot for you to do. Even the practice area with all the tutorials have very in-depth guides on how every single one of the Pokemon fighters work, not only teaching you the basics of battle, but teaching you a lot of combos to help prepare you and make this a fighting game where you're not just self-educating yourself by mashing buttons. But no matter what game mode you decide to go into outside of customization, you're going to be taking part in the game's very unique battle system. And that very battle system is what made me so confused when trying to describe this game as a single genre. In combat, Pokken Tournament is a 3D fighting game and a 2D fighting game at the same time. In every battle, you will constantly shift between 2 phases. A field phase, where you have an over-the-shoulder perspective and you can freely roam around the 3D arena, and the duel phase, where you will be locked into a side-scrolling traditional Tekken-like fighting game system, where you will have more close-quarters combat. And that's the uniqueness of the game, because it's like a cross between Dragon Ball Z Shin Budokai 2 and the Tekken series. And the strategy of this shifting system is that all of your attacks change depending on what mode you're in. Your mid-air strong attack will do something completely different in the duel phase than what it does in the field phase. And speaking of attacks, you don't really have a lot of different attacks you can use. Outside of grabs and counter attacks, you've got 3 basic attack buttons like in a lot of fighters. But instead of light, medium, and heavy attacks, you've got ranged projectile attacks, homing attacks, and strong attacks. The in-depth portion being what I just mentioned a moment ago, with the fact that all of these attacks will do different things depending on what phase you're in. To go along with these, you also have your synergy gauge, which is eventually used to temporarily power up and give you the ability to use ultimate attacks. In support Pokemon, letting you summon someone to help you, whether they buff your stats or attack your opponent to create an opening for a combo. All of these elements come together into a combo system that's very in-depth for people who love fighting games, but also pretty simple for casual players. But it all depends on what Pokemon you're using in battle. Some are very easy to master, some are very difficult to master. But thankfully, as I mentioned earlier, the tutorial section has very extensive guides to help you learn how every single Pokemon works. So if your favorite character on the roster just happens to be one of the hardest to learn, the tutorial will help you learn so you don't have to teach yourself. And of course, the unlocking and RPG elements come into play as well. Every time you finish a battle, you can get new customization gear for your avatar that will pretty much indefinitely keep unlocking, as there are literally hundreds of different items, but you also gain experience to level up. As you level up, you gain skill points that you can freely allocate to your stats, like attack, defense, synergy mode effects, or support buffs. And those really help when you're having trouble in the story mode and you need that extra bit of attack to be able to finish a battle faster. Now, before closing this section down, when I first heard about this game's story mode, I heard the story campaign was extremely boring and grinding. Now that I've played through the entire story mode, I can say there is a point where the story feels a little bit grindy, but it doesn't happen until almost the very end of the game, a point after all of the major story events have already been resolved. The last league is extremely long, and that's why it feels so grindy. All of the leagues before that have been pretty balanced in fighting battles here and there, going through league tournaments, and unlocking content through all of the missions that you can do in each league. Now, I'm not saying people are wrong when they say the story mode is grindy. I'm just saying that the only point where it felt grind heavy to me was at that very last stretch before the end credits roll. Now let's talk about length. The game's story mode has 4 different leagues to conquer. Setting aside the 10 to 12 hours I took to raise my Gardevoir in level and learn the game by constantly fighting the very hard AI in single battle mode, I'd gauge story completion at around 10 to 12 hours total. Now once you beat the game, you do unlock a post-game league that's even more difficult to play through. But outside of daily challenges and going back to the other leagues to continue unlocking avatar pieces, there's not really a lot to the post-game as far as single player is concerned. Now let's talk about presentation. The graphics of this game are incredible. There is a huge amount of detail. Outside of the synergy burst mode, there are very little to no jagged edges. It just looks absolutely beautiful and has led a lot of people to think, is this what the Nintendo Switch Pokemon RPG is going to look like? And performance is the same, for the most part. Frame rate is constant and very smooth for single player and online multiplayer, but the Wii U version of Pokken Tournament was known for having huge frame drops in split screen multiplayer, and Pokken Tournament DX has those same frame drops. When you do split screen, there's a lot of lag. Thankfully, there is a screen sharing mode where it doesn't do split screen and the frame rate stays stable. It's a little awkward for player 2, but it's stable. And now let's talk about battery life. With the visuals the way that they are, you can't expect the game to have really high battery times, and it doesn't. Here are my times from 100% to 0%. Maximum brightness of the Wi-Fi on, 2 hours and 46 minutes. Maximum brightness of the Wi-Fi off, 2 hours and 52 minutes. Lower brightness of the Wi-Fi on, 3 hours and 26 minutes. Lower brightness of the Wi-Fi off, 3 hours and 30 minutes. Now we've definitely seen worse, but as I said before, the graphical level is phenomenal, so these low battery times were expected. Now in conclusion, Pokken Tournament DX really is the definitive version of this title, way past its Wii U and arcade counterparts. Now the split screen frame drops do still happen, but this is a fun fighting game, merging 3D and 2D fighters into a fun and unique way for all of you to become the very best, like no one ever was. Reviews to Go rates Pokken Tournament DX for the Nintendo Switch an 8.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below or head to the website at www.gameplay-ation.com shop.reviewstogo.com.